Sorry, I cannot stop grumbling.
I'm used to it though.
Musical Talk, the UK independent musical theatre podcast.
Hello, welcome to Musical Talk. We're joined again by Dr. Rachael Livermore. Hello, Rachael, how are you?
Hello, Mr. Nick.
Last time we had you on, what did we talk about? I can't remember. It was
Many musicals.
Yes, all the things we saw at the end of 2018. We're now into 2019. We've previewed what's coming up in 2019, but one of the things we did mention, well, I mentioned with Tonya, was this massive Les Misery, we should call it, because a lot of people are very upset about what I call the museum production of Les Mis closing. It's the iconic one with the revolve. It's the only one left in the world. You know, Les Mis has been a massive success, and it's the world's longest running musical. Certainly feels like it when you watch it, and it is moving from the Queen's Theatre to the Gielgud Theatre, which is right next door on Shaftesbury Avenue, and then they're moving it back to the Queen's Theatre for some bizarre reason, but they're getting rid of the iconic Trevor Nunn, John Caird production, and they're putting the Lawrence O'Connor non-revolve, more projection, 21st century shiny production in, aren't they?
And people are very, very upset, and I do love it when people are upset.
We are of the school of thought that this is a good thing.
Because we've decided we want people to be upset with us.
Yes,
apparently.
And Rachel's address will be given at the end of the episode should you wish to descend upon her house like the angry mob in Beauty and the Beast.
But please sing when you do it.
Yes, and quote Shakespeare at the same time. I don't mind this, but I'm in the school of thought that this is because I saw the original Les Mis, version 1, we'll call it, about 20 years ago.
This was back at the Barbican.
No, this was very funny. This was when it was at the Palace, where I saw it.
Yeah, that's where I first saw it as well. But then I've seen it at the Queen's, probably 30 times.
Wow. And you still haven't slit your wrists from depression yet.
I love it.
I need to see Les Mis again because I didn't like the original production because I had no idea what the hell was going on. And that is a flaw with Les Mis because it's such a complicated story anyway, isn't it?
Where were you sitting in the Palace?
Front row.
Oh, okay. Not the same. So when I first saw it in the Palace, I also didn't like it. But that's because I had balcony seats. And it's very, very distant. I didn't already know the story. I was struggling to make out a lot of the lyrics. And because it's sung through, it can be difficult to follow the story if you can't hear all the words.
And you've actually read the novel of Les Mis, haven't you?
No, I think this was after I saw the musical that I read the novel. So I didn't really know what was going on. It's all very distant, and you're very, very high up in the balcony at the Palace.
It's horrible.
And I think I had jet lag. I think I'd just flown back from somewhere. And I was bored. So for years, I thought I hated Les Mis until I lived in London and I had a flatmate who was obsessed with it and dragged me to see it at the Queen's. And I went back over and over and over again. And this is why, I know you make fun of me for it, this is why I'm a snob about where I sit in the theatre. Because I don't want to replicate
You're not a snob, you're just doing things correctly.
I'm doing things correctly. It's a beautiful show and it is iconic. But I've also seen the new Shiny production on Broadway.
Which I saw at the Barbican at the time of the 25th anniversary.
And it's just more modern. I like it. I like that the opening scene, they're not miming, what are they doing, digging up the road? I don't know what people do on chain gangs. It's not an experience I have apparently. In my life. What are they doing? They're rowing a boat or something.
In the film, they're rowing a boat.
Yeah, so I can't remember if I'm conflating that with the film or not. It seems more modern. They have actual sets, they have props.
Real candlesticks.
It is shiny. It has all the projection nonsense that I know you don't like.
No, I like the projections.
Yeah.
That's why I like this show, because I like technically interesting shows. I feel that's what this 25th anniversary production of Les Mis offered. I was blown away by the Barbican production. I thought, this scene is meant to be in a hospital. This scene is meant to be in a church. This scene is meant to be in a street. We're in a sewer. And none of that is made clear, from my memory, in the original Trevor Nunn production. There's so many angry people at the moment listening to this show. They must think I'm an idiot.
Well, you are a bit of a heathen, it's true. But I think the original production does rely very much on the suspension of disbelief of you're creating the hospital in your mind because you see her in a bed with a white sheet. But that's not what modern theatre-going audiences expect.
No.
And there are so many of these modern shows that have very high-tech sets and all these high-tech projections.
But the irony is, Les Mis at the time had a high-tech set and a high-tech, not projections, but the Revolve, the whole show revolves around the Revolve, and the Revolve revolves around the whole show. Literally, Forbidden Broadway make fun of it, but you said something really interesting. We're having lunch earlier, and you said, if you ask anyone on the street... What?
Yeah, so obviously... I don't know what kind of audience downloads musical talk, but this is not the typical person on the street. I think people people who are very into theatre clearly associate Les Mis with the Revolve, but the average theatre goer is a tourist, especially for something like Les Mis. They're in London, they're going to see one show. Oh, Les Mis, I've heard of that. They have no idea that there's a Revolve in it, but they would go see this current production and think, oh, this is great, but it feels really 80s.
So how would you feel about Phantom if they took away the chandelier? Now, you saw what they did for Les Mis. They also did it for Phantom as well, didn't you? A couple of times you saw that show.
I saw the one at the Royal Albert Hall, which is obviously a completely different production, and also the 25th anniversary tour. I think I went to every single location that tour visited, and I think it's beautiful. I wouldn't be devastated if they took out the original Phantom, because I love Phantom, but it's very 80s.
And it would still be Phantom if they did it however they decided to stage it.
I think one of the massive flaws that Phantom has is, for the iconic title song, you don't see the cast for half of it. They changed that in the 25th anniversary production. You actually see them the whole time. The set's a lot more interesting. They're actually clambering around, which you only have the illusion they're doing in the original production. The boat scene is not as good.
Right.
I would like it if they changed that to be more like the original.
I wish I'd seen the version in Las Vegas with the real...
Oh, yeah, I missed that by a week.
The fake dummies in the boxes and things like that. That looked stunning. But we're talking about Les Mis this week. I'm sure we will turn to Phantom at some point. But
so I get that Les Mis it has historical nostalgia value. It is the original production.
It's a museum piece.
It is. But I think it's also okay that things progress.
There's one scene, and spoilers if you haven't seen the new version of Les Mis, turn off for the next minute or so, but there's one scene I loved in the Barbican production where Javert's suicide and he's standing on the fence and he commits suicide. The bridge splits apart and he's floating in space, not space, but he's floating, and then behind him there's a projection of the water, and he gets sucked into the back of the backdrop, and that's amazing.
It is amazing, and I think, to what you were saying earlier about not entirely being able to follow the plot, it makes it so much clearer what's going on and why the song is called Stars.
What happens in the original version? Doesn't the
original
bridge...
Oh no, he's just kind of standing there.
That's a very crappy suicide.
I remember the first time I saw it when I was very, very far away, it wasn't clear to me that was what was going on at all. In better seats and obviously understanding the plot and being able to hear the words, it's a bit more apparent. You know, Andrew Lloyd Webber has always said about West End theatre that because it's mostly attended by tourists, you should be able to follow the plot even if you don't really speak English. And you cannot do that in Les Mis at all. So I think making the production a bit more sparkly is going to bring in more tourists who aren't down for listening to every single word.
Trevor Nunn's production, whilst very theatrical, very RSC, it's very... You have to use your imagination, and that's not what people like in the theatre anymore, sadly.
Yeah, I think it used to be, but now, I mean, technology is so advanced that people aren't accustomed to imagining that. I still don't know what job it is that Valjean has where he doesn't get paid.
Working for the US government?
It looks like he's doing laundry in the river or something, but it's unclear.
And even the sewer scene was clever in this. I seem to remember half the stage went up in the air, and there was the projections are great because they're all illustrations by Victor Hugo or in the style of Victor Hugo. A lot of people are very angry about this, and that there's a website called change.org, which you can go to ironically protest about the change that Les Mis is experiencing. Would you rather see the same old show you've seen with a tired cast, Or would you rather see a brand new shiny show with a cast that are all excited to be in a brand new show? I think it's going to breathe massive amounts of life into the piece.
Yeah, and I think people have been saying for years and years, oh, this is going to be the year that Les Mis closes. Oh, it got held on a bit because of such and such an anniversary, the 10th and then the 25th. Yeah. Oh, it got held on because of the movie, but eventually it's going to close. And I think you predicted last year that it was going to close.
Yeah, and it has.
Sort of. I don't think that counts. But this is a way of giving new life to it. That it isn't the same old show that everyone's seen already. It's a new thing. So people who are unlike me, who don't typically go to the same show over and over and over again, might be convinced to, oh, I heard that Les Mis is all new and shiny. Maybe I'll go check it out again. So from a business point of view, I completely get it. But also from an artistic point of view, I like that it's being modernised and it feels more like a fresh new musical.
And what did you love about the 25th anniversary production, other than the fact that they had props? And
honestly, that's the only thing I remember that was different.
So you don't remember different iconic moments being completely different?
No, I think it was only visually different as far as I remember. Sounded the same.
Yeah. I think what's going to happen is we're going to see Les Mis in its current state, even though ticket prices are through the roof, come the end of the run. But I don't think we'll go then, because that's just crazy. And then,
well, this is also from a very cynical business point of view. If you want people to rush to see it quickly before it ends, then this is how you do it.
And then we'll see the new one and compare and contrast. But it's certainly the most interesting thing of 2019 that this iconic show has decided. I mean, maybe the ticket sales have been dwindling. I don't think so.
I mean, they're certainly not right now, but...
Why, listener, do you like the old production, or why do you like the new production? Do let Rachel know. I'm sure she'll have a lot to say about it.
Do send me all your hate mail. I enjoy it.
I don't know why they're moving it back to the Queen's, though. That's maybe theatre contracts are tied up years in advance, and this was always planned, but the Queen's isn't... Do you associate that as the home of Les Mis? I associate the Palace as the home of Les Mis.
I guess so, because that's the first place I saw it, but no, I don't know.
Is it a nice theatre?
It's fine.
Would I struggle?
I mean, you struggle in most places because you're 10 feet tall.
I want to talk about everybody's talking about Jamie.
That's a really awkward sentence construction.
Yes. And...
So we wanted to find out why everyone was talking about Jamie, didn't we?
Yes. So we went to see everybody was talking about Jamie on a Saturday matinee, and in a not very comfortable theatre, I will add. That's one of my lasting memories. Was the legroom was shocking for good seats.
But like I said, that's true everywhere for you.
I know, but there are some theatres that really are good, and some theatres that are not. What were your preconceptions about Jamie?
The only things I'd heard about it were completely positive. Everyone I know who had seen it absolutely loved it, said it was the best show of the year. So I think my expectations were maybe a little high. It's
a great story. We talked about it ad nauseum on Musical Talk, but if you're new to the party, it's based on a documentary, which in itself is based on a true story. But Rachel told me the original Jamie is from County Durham.
Yes.
So obviously not to confuse it with Billy Elliot, they decided
to move him to Sheffield.
Because it was done by the Crucible, which is a theatre in Sheffield, and they actually create Sheffield on stage. So it is the ugliest set I've ever seen in my life. Just grey walls everywhere, but that is Sheffield for you.
Well, okay, all Yorkshire people can send your hate mail to Nick.
And Lancashire people can send love mail to me. I went in slightly more prepared because I think I knew the kind of music we'd be getting, but it was the lyrics that really surprised me. I'm a stickler for proper rhyming, and this show, I think 99.8% of it had proper rhyming, which was wonderful. I've written some notes here. Wonderful lyrics was what I wrote. I can't remember any of them, can't remember any of the songs. Well, I remember a couple of them, but I have listened to the cast recordings since. Have you had a desire to go back to the cast recording?
I've got to say, I kind of enjoyed the music while I was hearing it, but I left the theatre with no desire to download the cast recording.
Okay, and is that a bad sign for you?
Yeah, but I mean, you know what my taste is. I like big, belty, melodramatic ballads.
Yes,
and that's
you're
not
stuck
what
in
this
1986.
is. I am stuck in 1986. And this is pop music.
The big issue Rachel and I had with it was that he builds up this great big drag show that he's going to be part of. He goes to a costume shop, he puts on a red dress.
Immediately gets booked for his first drag show.
Yeah.
This all seems to come extremely easily to him.
And we never see the drag show.
And there's this like long drawn out scene where you see him getting ready. He puts the dress on, he puts the wig on, he's got his back to you the whole time. And the whole time you're thinking, is he going to turn around? And like, how has he done the makeup in this short time? Or maybe it's going to close Act 1 like that, and then Act 2 will open with you seeing the drag show. And no, you just don't see it.
Act 2 opens back at school with everyone talking about Jamie, but we never work out why. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it's not about that. Maybe it's about him conforming to the school life and everyone else. But people don't have an issue with him.
It was disappointing because the big issue I had with the whole story was the lack of conflict. There's one bully, but he never really seems that threatening. Everyone else is kind of, they show up to his drag show, and you kind of think, oh, they're here to make fun of him, and so he's really nervous and he gets cold feet and doesn't want to go on. And that's why I think seeing the drag show would be a big deal. Maybe it was a deliberate decision not to do it because...
Time?
Well, maybe because people would be focusing on, I don't think people would focus on it, it's a boy in a dress in 2019. Especially if they're not if they're going to a musical about a guy who wants to be a drag queen. But I think it would have been a big deal to see him overcome those cold feet, walk out on stage, and then see the reaction of the kids. Because other than the one bully, the kids' reactions are all, oh, wow, this is awesome. And that's why they're all talking about Jamie and they think he's great. But we never see them have that moment of, oh, actually, we're cool with this.
Would you say the father is a conflict as well?
Again, I couldn't tell if it was a deliberate choice. And maybe it's constrained by being based on a true story. I don't know how well it sticks to the truth. So he has this conflict with his father who's not supportive, but his mother is lying and covering up for it and trying to make him think his father's supportive. So it is very sad when he finds out that this isn't true. And that's never resolved. And I can't decide, is that a fault in the story that conflict's never resolved? Or is it saying, you know what, some parents are toxic and you don't need them in your lives, which is obviously something I sympathise with.
The bully relationship was interesting because there's a bit where the bully and Jamie kiss, and it happened so quickly I couldn't work out who initiated it.
I initially thought it was the bully who initiated it, which is a really common trope that the bully is actually just homophobic. Is a repressed
American Beauty and all that kind of, Act 2 builds up to the prom the same way Act 1 builds up to the drag act. Another thing we never see.
Yeah, that's really weird. We were describing the plot of this musical. Was it to your mum earlier? Oh, no, it was to your friend. Yeah. Sorry. And his first reaction was, oh, well, if it's based around a prom, that's, a great setting for a musical. And we said, well, yeah, except you never actually get to see it.
Yeah, and you think a drag show would be another great setting for a musical. Maybe they're trying to, as you say, it was done on purpose to give us the unexpected and things like that.
Maybe it's just trying not to be Kinky Boots too hard. It's definitely better than Kinky Boots. I'll give it that.
Does the song called And You Don't Even Know It, which is Jamie's the first song in the show.
That was kind of catchy.
Performs the same function as Spotlight, which is sung by the best friend, which is a lovely song. But she's telling Jamie what he already wants to hear, which is he's amazing. And this is another issue you have with the piece.
Yeah, so in Act 1, I really like the best friend.
Yeah.
She's
the fag hag, as she calls herself.
She calls herself a fag hag. I don't know if we can say that. She's a Muslim nerd. Mentions that she comes from a very conservative family. She has to conceal that has Jamie over to visit in her room. And so you think she's clearly got some conflict going on in her life. She comes from a very conservative Muslim family, and her best friend is a gay boy who wants to be a drag queen. You never get any insight into her life. Her entire function in the story is to support Jamie.
And you got excited when she had some star...
yeah, she's a space nerd. I was so excited when you actually see her room when she has Jamie over and you see, oh, she's a space nerd, she's so cool. But you never learn anything about her. All she does is sing this song to Jamie, which is reassuring this very conventionally attractive man that he's not ugly. Great. And that was actually true of every female character.
And the mum as well.
The mum as well, the mum's friend. All of them exist purely to support Jamie.
But everyone's talking about Jamie, so the clues
everyone's talking about Jamie. Yeah, that's true. I felt like it needed a subplot. Either the mum and her friend should have hooked up, or we should have had a subplot with the best friend. I would have liked that a lot.
In the intro, you said, I wonder what the best friend's story arc is going to be. And it's great that we have, such wonderful representation of modern British Asian culture on stage. I haven't seen that since...
Is it represented, though? I mean, it's great that she's on
It's
stage and she's
represented
in a
more
hijab,
than most
but
musicals.
she's just there to support the white guy. I really wanted her to have a storyline, and her big moment is at the end. She basically tells is it the bully? She tells to get lost.
I think so. To words to that effect.
Yeah.
You can swear on this show, by the way.
Oh, can I?
It's all right.
Oh, yeah, she tells the bully to fuck off. I can't remember what she actually says. But again, it's purely about Jamie. She never actually really stands up for herself in any way. And I think I would have liked to see some kind of storyline with her. We find out at the beginning she really wants to be a doctor. Granted, the story ends with prom. Is prom a thing nowadays?
Yeah. Thank you for bringing America back with you, by the way.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I'm off for Five Guys tonight.
So, granted, right, we're never really going to find out what she does with her life, but I don't know, a little postscript would have been nice. Does she become a doctor?
Find out, and everybody's talking about Jamie never dies. But I think there is a sort of subplot in the fact that you have Jamie's, this father figure, you could say, for Jamie, because he doesn't have one, is the owner of this kind of costume shop where the owner used to be a drag queen. He's the one that puts this whole idea and, instills into his mind that, yes, you can be a drag queen. Has a song called Over the Top, which it's full of marching metaphors, but yet the song is done in a 1960s Phil Spector beat. Dun, 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 dun. And I guess musically they're making the choice because that's when he was a performer. They go back to that kind of feel of music for him, but then don't fill it with marching metaphors. It just seems slightly odd. And he had a sort of Barry Manilow-esque Copacabana kind of Lola tragic song story about his character, the drag that he played. And that was kind of sweet. I just wanted more from the show. It just seemed a bit not West End. The performances were great. We will say that. I don't think we can fault the cast at all. I just think, as usual, it's problems with the book.
Yeah, I just think it needed to be fleshed out more. It's a great A plot for a musical. It just needed a B plot.
Yeah, it's doing well. It's a very British musical, which I did like. It's certainly Billy Elliot for the 2010 generation. Do you think a bit too similar to Billy Elliot, though, with its...
Well, I think the comparison with Billy Elliot just shows how unfleshed out, is there a word for that? It is. Yeah. How thin it is. Because Billy Elliot, yes, it's a story about a boy who wants to be a ballet dancer, but it has a setting. It's set in this big events in history going on. The miners' strike is obviously a huge deal in the plot, whereas Jamie is about Jamie, and that's it.
I was always told when you're writing musicals, never set it in the modern day because it will never be relevant. Even with Billy Elliot, if you set it in the 80s, or if you set Jamie in the 90s, it's always an era that you can look back on and you can base it around historical events that people remember.
I think you could have made it relevant. I mean, you've got a Muslim best friend, have a B plot about Islamophobia. They don't use her at all.
Maybe she'll have her own show one day.
That would be great. I'll go to see it.
So that's our thoughts on everyone's talking about Jamie. Feel free to disagree. Once again, Rachel, your Twitter handle is what?
RC Livermore. Okay. Send me all the hatred.
We've also gone to see a wonderful singer called Ramin Karimloo, and Tony and I mentioned this on our 2019 preview because he is touring the UK. Tell me about your obsession, your enjoyment of Mr. Karimloo.
Well, that goes back to when he was playing Rachael in Phantom of the Opera, a character I don't particularly like, but I
Who
thought,
does?
Yeah, I thought, okay, this guy's good. He has a nice voice. Didn't really think about him again until he came back to play the Phantom. Phantom of the Opera, as you know, is my favourite musical. But I'd kind of gone off it for a little while in the mid-2000s. I'd been a couple of times and it just felt a little tired. No offence to the cast at the time. Could just as well have been me. And then when did he take over that role? Like 2007?
You ask as if I know.
There. I know, somewhere around there. And one of my friends said, I think you should go back to see it. This guy's great. And I looked up the name and thought, oh, okay, that Rachael. All right. And obviously he was wonderful.
He got a promotion.
Yeah. And he was absolutely fantastic. So then obviously followed him to Love Never Dies.
They play the same role.
We played the same role.
We talked about this before the concert started. Did he treat Love Never Dies as like Act 3 of the same story?
You'll have to interview him and ask him.
Because usually he played the Phantom
You're
as
asking me about shows I saw more than a decade ago. So there was a bit of controversy at the time he took over the role of the Phantom, that he said he was playing the role as though the Phantom was autistic. And people were upset about this. I don't know enough to have a strong opinion either way, but I really liked the way he played the Phantom. I don't think he did that to the same extent in Love Never Dies.
Okay.
I certainly didn't notice it, but I also think the way the character is treated in Love Never Dies is very, very different. I know you've heard me rant about this a lot. I love the Phantom, and clearly at the end of Phantom of the Opera, like everyone else, I want Christine to end up with a Phantom, even though in real life I would be screaming at her to run the other way. But he is a murderizing psychopath. In Love Never Dies,
Is murderizing a word?
It is, in my head. But in Love Never Dies, they treat the original Phantom of the Opera story as though it's a very straightforward romance and she chose the wrong guy. And that's always bugged me a bit. I think you can give her that sense of regret and wishing she hadn't ended up with the abusive alcoholic. Alcoholizing. But still acknowledge that this guy is creepy. And he's just not as creepy in Love Never Dies. And I do love Love Never Dies. That's not a criticism, but I think it would be
Love
very
Never
difficult
Dies
to play
did
the character
seem
the same.
Love Never Dies did seem more soap opera-y than Phantom. Fan fiction, I believe, was a term chucked around.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short, Rachael likes Ramin Karimloo.
Oh, and he did a tour. It must have been just after the 25th anniversary of Phantom of the Opera at the Royal Albert Hall, which I also went to. He toured the UK in much larger venues, and I went to every single date on that tour.
There's a slight theme with your life here, Rachael. Being
I do follow shows around,
slightly
it's true.
obsessive.
Yeah.
Take your car away from me, I think.
Well, I certainly had my bank balance taken away from me.
I remember we had Ramin on the show twice, I think. I've interviewed him twice, and Rachael got very jealous of me when that was happening. But long story short, we went to see Ramin at the beautiful venue called The Stables in Milton Keynes, which is a very odd 1980s swimming pool, like a leisure centre, effectively, down a country lane in a village called Wavendon or Wavendon, depending what your outlook on life is. And we went to see Ramin, had some cool warm-up acts first. Ramin came on around 9 o'clock and performed his heart out for an hour and a half with a great band of a fiddle player, drum kit, the double bass, keyboard, and Ramin and the keyboardist and guitarist flitted around on different plucky instruments. And it was great. What he does, you introduced me to it, Rachael, he does something called broadgrass.
Yeah, it's a cross between Broadway and bluegrass.
Which is wonderful. I want now every show to have bluegrass mashups because Les Mis done on a mandolin is quite beautiful.
And it is great to hear something different done with these songs. I've been to a lot of these concerts by West End performers, and it's just, the greatest hits album that every West End performer puts out. So it's nice to hear something different done with them.
I especially liked the fact that it was a joint effort and it wasn't all about Ramin, and it was less sincere than a lot of these cheesy concerts you get. Because I said to you in the car, I'm worried that it's going to be, oh, you're the best audience ever, and this song is about my life. And it was like Ramin was making it up as he went along. It had a very homemade feel to it, which suits that kind of music as well, and the fact that it's a bit of a party and there was audience interaction.
Yeah, very different to his previous shows on his other tours.
Were you worried about the quality of the venue? Because you said it's almost like it's gone down.
It's definitely smaller than the venues that he's played in the past.
Do you prefer that?
It was a really nice experience.
I was slightly annoyed
I
at
really
myself
liked
because
it.
I missed half of the best song because I went to the loo. And
just before he did my favourite song.
yeah, he's very personable on stage. And
yeah, he's definitely got so much better at that. The very first time I saw him do a solo concert was before his main tour in Southampton. And he seemed very, very awkward on stage. Like, he didn't quite not know what to do when he wasn't choreographed. And that's all gone away. He's completely natural.
You said when there was an instrumental or
Oh, it was so awkward. He would just turn his back on the audience. But no, now he's very, very natural, really good at interacting with the audience, and seemed just very chill and relaxed.
And he got some people up on stage to sing with him, which was nice. One of
Yeah.
whom was in the audience. She was in the front row. a family friend, I think, or something wonderful like that. And they did. It was essentially, if you don't like Lloyd Webber and The Greatest Showman, it's probably the best you don't see this concert. But all testament to him, I don't massively like Lloyd Webber or The Greatest Showman, and I was still thoroughly entertained for an hour and a half because you got the different...
He only did one Greatest Showman song.
I know, but that's
But
enough.
the warm-up acts also did a song each, so it felt a bit much.
But even one Greatest Showman song is...
But you didn't remember that song was from The Greatest Showman.
Which shows the quality
I was
of The
rolling
Greatest...
my eyes at you, and you said, what?
Rachel is usually rolling her eyes at me, so I just don't
True.
notice anymore. You know, that shows the lack of quality when it comes to The Greatest Showman songs. I thought it was possibly from The Greatest Showman because it was dull, but to show that I still enjoy the evening because of Ramin's stage presence, because of the banter with the band, the bander, you could call it, the fact that it was interesting arrangements of these songs really shows the quality of what you'll get on the tour.
And obviously his voice is
his voice is nice.
phenomenal.
What was the duet that he did with the girl who came up from the audience? Can you remember?
Wasn't it from Superstar?
Yes, it was. You weren't too warmed by this, but ironically, it was the Let It Go.
Yeah, he did a version of Let It Go, and he gave a little bit of an awkward preamble that made me think he possibly had the same reservations I did about how he wasn't sure about this song, but they did some fiddling with the lyrics, and he's known a lot of strong women in his life, and then he just launched into Let It Go, where he changed everything to be in second person, so it's...
The cold never bothered you anyway.
Yeah, but it feels like, I don't know, it's such a self-empowerment anthem that singing it to someone...
removes the point.
It feels almost condescending. I mean, his voice is beautiful, and I got to hear him sing Let It Go, which is a song I love, so great. But yeah, I wasn't completely sold on it.
But everything else
I
thoroughly enjoyed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's doing a big tour of the UK, so if you are interested in broadgrass, and I have to think about that when I need to say it, because it's not a genre of music that one is at all familiar with. You said there were a lot of fans in... If I think you're crazy, I should meet some real Ramin fans.
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely some hardcore fans in attendance. Yeah. And
it's lovely. He did Do You Hear the People Sing? And there were musical theatre people in that night, of course, so they sung. They might have been plants, I don't know.
I don't know. There was one guy near us who was quite amazing. Yes,
and Ramin did an impression of him, which was quite fun. But it just shows how cool he is on stage and what a fun persona he does have for these sorts of intimate concerts.
Musical Talk.
So we have jumped in the Musical Talk time machine, and since then Rachel and I have seen the original production of Les Mis that is still at the Queen's Theatre. Rachel, first of all, hello.
Hello.
You love Les Mis, don't you? I think we've established this on the show.
Yes, and I have seen the production in the Queen's approximately a gajillion times.
You counted?
But it was still, I counted. That's a precise number, but it was still great to see it again.
Why?
Because it's just wonderful. It's beautiful. The music's beautiful. The performances were great. It's just a wonderful show.
I will say the legroom was highly acceptable in this theatre, which was always a plus.
In the stalls, at least.
Yes.
So now are you thankful that I'm snobby about my seating choices?
I am thankful, yes, because I'm apparently 10 feet tall. It's such a lovely... Well, it's not a lovely production. You know, it's everything you want Les Mis to be. It's dark, it's gritty, but there's something about it that just grabs you and doesn't let... It's almost hypnotic, I would say.
Well, I think the fact that it's sung through helps a lot, because you don't really get much of a break. It's just constantly coming at you the whole time. The music's soaring all the time. It's beautiful.
I actually saw a review of the show, and here's a paragraph that for me sums up my thoughts. Quote, "My head kept pointing out the simplifications from the novel and the implausible character developments, but my heart kept swelling up as I fell under the show's emotional spell again, and in the Act 1 finale I felt myself properly welling up, remembering why I loved it so much the first time. I guess you could say it had brought me home. Punny.
So who's that review from?
I cannot remember,
Oh.
but it's perfectly
I think I would fail you if you put that in an assignment.
It perfectly sums up my feelings, because I was wiping away the tears at the end of that one, wasn't I?
I mean, yeah, One Day More is the perfect musical theatre number, isn't it?
It is. But it also borrows very heavily from opera, and that's what this show does. Even things like the very loose characterizations that people fall in love incredibly quickly. That's all operatic traits, especially European opera, which this show is basing itself very heavily on. You've actually read the book, though, haven't you, Rachel? So tell us interesting facts about the...
I don't really feel the need to just accept it despite the oversimplifications from the novel, because I think that novel badly needs oversimplifying.
Right.
It's tedious, frankly.
The issue that we have with it is the Cosette and Marius situation.
I've never been into the Cosette Marius storyline. As you say, they see each other once and immediately fall in love. It's completely ridiculous. But that's a trope. It's not even just an opera thing. People do it in movies all the time, and
Enchanted
it's never
makes fun
made
of it.
any sense. Yeah. But I'm not really there for their storyline.
Can you imagine how long it would be if they were to develop that relationship, though?
Yeah,
Another
it would have
excuse
to be
for
10 hours
78
long.
more ballads. But the show moves very, very quickly, and that's what this score enables it to do, because if it stopped for dialogue, it would be a very, very, very long...
Oh, yeah, because, it covers decades and many different locations, so the fact that it squeezes in under 3 hours is an achievement.
But what you were saying, which is really interesting, we've said this before, is that this is not the original production.
Well, yeah, this is why I don't entirely understand the outrage about it closing for an update, because it's not the original production. It has projections, the orchestrations have been updated, it has evolved over its lifetime.
Do we know when the projections were added?
Oh, no clue.
So they've always been there as far as you can remember.
Oh, I don't remember when it first moved to the Queen's, but certainly when I saw it a whole bunch of times in quick succession, which would have been 2012, 2013, they were already there.
That was when you hit your gazillion.
That's when I
Count.
got to a gajillion, yeah.
Come the end of Act 1, you weren't too moved, or it was an impressive performance, so I don't want to say impressed, but you weren't too convinced, I would say, by Jean Valjean, were you?
No, I thought he was fine.
But his Bring Him Home, God on High, whatever it's called, was absolutely incredible.
His Bring Him Home really did bring the house down.
Brought it home for you.
It brought it home indeed. It was amazing.
You mentioned the orchestrations earlier, so thank you. It's nice to know that people actually do notice these. But I remember seeing the production at the Barbican, and the orchestrations used in that show are still being used and will continue to be used once this show does its musical chairs with empty tables. Don't roll your eyes at me, please. You noticed an electric guitar, which was quite exciting, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I don't know at what point in the show's long history that was added, but it was the first time I'd noticed it, and it's pretty cool.
And there's a bellowing organ in this orchestra, which really works. And I've noticed that from the 25th anniversary cast recording. I just don't know what it is about this show that just works. You are dreading it in a way.
Speak for yourself. I was really looking forward to it, and I loved it.
I wasn't dreading it, but I think, it's got that in it, and it's got that, and it is literally like the songs have gone way beyond anything the show is. It's literally a hit by hit of musical theatre, isn't it? More so than Phantom, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And obviously, it's a show that was basically designed for me because, as we've discussed, I'm stuck in the 80s, and this is just ballad after ballad after ballad, lots of big belty numbers. I'm totally there for it. The only time in the entire show that I really do kind of sit back and zone out and start thinking about my grocery shopping is the Marius Cosette numbers, which is nothing to do with the performers. They were great.
Yep.
I just have zero interest in that storyline.
No heart full of love for you.
Nope. My heart was very devoid of love.
You have an issue with the fact that females in this show, they're all just mothers or wives or girlfriends or things.
We've discussed before how a lot of these stories don't entirely hold up, but we accept them as a product of their time.
Yeah.
And this is very true for Les Mis. The role of all of the women in the show is to be either mothers, in which case they're not allowed to be sexualized at all, so obviously Fantine has no love interest, or they're pining after a man. So yeah, Eponine's only real contribution is to be pining after Marius. God knows why. He's dull as ditch water.
The other character's more interesting. Who's the other? Onduous, is that his name?
Yeah, I think he would have been more my type.
Arduous or something.
And Joris. Yeah, so that does frustrate me. I would like the women in this show to have some agency, but I think this is what you get when you really like 80s shows.
We also had an Irish Thénardier, which was... not Thénardier, sorry.
Yes, Thénardier.
Thénardier. Oh, good,
Yeah.
I'm getting it right. We also had an Irish Thénardier, master of the house, and the actor's actually Welsh, so he
Oh, really?
that wasn't just him.
So it was a deliberate choice. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I've never had an Irish Thénardier before, but it worked pretty well.
Because normally they're a bit Cockney, and maybe he was thinking, it's been Cockney for 38,000 years, or however long this show's been playing, and maybe I should do something different. I like that. I didn't
Yeah,
mind.
I thought it was cool. I think it would maybe be problematic if he was originating the role. If you think, it's a little bit of a stereotype that you make your drunken crook an Irishman. But because it's not always Irish, I think it's okay.
Have you heard the original French concept recording?
I have, yes.
And what do you think of that?
So my French is...
Better than mine.
Yeah, GCSE level, so I only pick up occasional phrases, so it doesn't do as much for me as the English one. I really like the French version of Eponine's song.
It felt more traditionally operatic, whereas if they kept the synthy 80s sounds, it would have felt 80s and a bit poppy, whereas in the 80s, the sounds are really contemporary because that's, it was of the time. It had a lot more lushness to it that I loved, and the sound design was wonderful. But those gunshots, oh my...
You're a complete wuss when it comes to gunshots. I don't think I like gunshots at all, but the ones in Les Mis, you see them coming, they're not...
No, there's one
that
you don't see
startling.
coming. There's a silence.
There's the sniper, dude. I think you're a wuss. I'm sorry, I have to say.
Ironically, the ones coming from the guns were fine. They were pathetic. It was the recorded, pre-record ones that made me jump about 8 feet in the air. I wonder if they'd made cuts to it as well, because it didn't seem as long as it did when I saw it many years ago at the Palace.
I think maybe you're just older.
And I wonder if that has a lot to do with it. If this is a show that you appreciate as you get older, when you have a better grasp of paying attention. I mean, dare I be that blunt?
I don't know. I think my attention span was much longer when I was younger, pre-internet.
Chapter 3 or 2 in this story is we have to see the revised version.
Yeah, so I think we've both seen a version of the revised production, right?
We have, yes. I think yours was far nearer than mine.
Yeah, I saw the
was.
one on Broadway. I'm looking forward to it because I think, as we've been discussing, they have been gradually updating the show, so it does still feel like a modern musical.
Yeah.
The one thing that's still there is, although I love the staging is dated. So
Well, it's very RSC. It's very slow
It
motion
is.
and miming
and we did both have a little bit of a giggle at Javert's suicide.
yes, I was pissing myself with laughter really because what is he doing?
He just steps slightly off a bridge and then flails. I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm used to suspension of disbelief in theatre. I know what they're suggesting.
Yes.
But the one in the 25th anniversary production on Broadway is so much better.
One of the best exits ever in theatre,
Right.
as one review I read described it as. Not this production. He just kind of rolled around on the
Oh yeah, and then he has to like roll off stage.
with the revolve
Yeah,
pushing
it
him
is
the
a
other
bit
way.
awkward. So I don't know. I'm totally here for getting the new production in London. I think it's a great way to keep this show up to date so that people still want to see it and so that it can keep running for another 30 odd years.
And tell me about your issues with the Stars song.
I'm an astrophysicist. I think I have to notice these things.
What does he get wrong?
The stars. It would be zero effort to put accurate stars in. Honestly, give me a call. I'll sort out your stars for you. Well, they were just randomly placed dots on the stage.
I thought you meant the lyrics were wrong.
Remind me of the lyrics.
There, out in the darkness.
Hang on, I'm still working through lyrics in my head. No, it's fine. Because it's just about, in the darkness, the multitudes, shining, whatever.
It was the star cloth that offended you. I
No,
thought it was
it was
the
the
lyrics.
literal star cloth. Yeah.
You wanted constellations to
Yes.
appear.
Yeah.
Oh, well, maybe in the new version you might get that.
I'll make you an accurate star cloth.
That's our Les Mis adventure. I'm really now looking forward to the new-ish version that's 10 years old as opposed to... And how long has this show been running now?
Les Mis as
Yeah.
a whole, 34 years.
Wow.
almost as long as me.
I know, it's nearly as old as I am. We went on a Wednesday night, sold out. Mm-hmm. It's not a massive theatre, which helps. It still draws people in. Why?
I think at this point, it's the legend of it, right? But as for how it got to this point, it has a lot of really catchy tunes in it. Mm-hmm. And it's a big, grand, epic story. I think it's exactly the kind of thing a lot of people like to see in the theatre. It's completely absorbing, wraps you up in this big story, makes you feel things, which a lot of musicals these days don't for me.
Apart from annoyed.
I frequently feel annoyed.
And poor.
And frequently poor also.
I think for me it's something about, if the show were just to end at to fall in love is to see the face of God or whatever it is, that might be the last line in the novel, I'm not sure. Knowing Victor Hugo, it probably goes on about 18,000 pages describing a cobblestone on the floor or something, but I think it's the final reprise of, do you hear the people sing? Will you join in our crusade? And that message still, especially now, that message is still incredibly powerful. So much so that some audience member decided to kind of reach to the stage with her hands. It was like a sort of Baptist church ceremony or something.
I think this is the kind of thing that always resonates, right? It's like a bunch of common people rising up against their oppressors and fighting, Vive la Revolution. One thing that's always kind of made me laugh is a lot of people assume it's about the French Revolution. It's not. It's some little weekend student thing that was a complete failure, but you can still be inspired by. They were very earnest about it. They tried.
And lost a lot of people on the way.
And they all died.
They tried and died. There you go. There's a new song for you. I think that has a lot to do with it. And if you're listening to this, you've seen Les Mis, but go and see the new version. Don't be annoyed that the current version is closing, because it's been, I want to say, mutating into this, but I don't mean that, do I? Like osmosis or something.
And the only reason there hasn't been uproar about the changes before is that they didn't have to close and move theatres and all those shenanigans. Well, except for the times when they did close and move theatres, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Whereas it requires a bit more work because they're actually changing the stage.
It shows, a friend of mine on Facebook said, I want to see it before it closes, so I see it in the original theatre.
But it's not the original theatre.
But it's not the original theatre. But that shows how long it's been at the Queen's. So people obviously come to associate the Queen's with this theatre.
But it's only been, somewhere between 10 and 15 years out of its 34-year run. Yeah.
That's still people finding musical theatre, though. 15 years ago, that's still the younger generation. God, hark at us. Yes, so...
Wait, I'm older than you and I'm not old, so shut up.
Come From Away is the next show that is sort of coming to London.
From Away?
From Away, yes, from far away. Broadway, to be precise. I think in a few weeks we'll be having more discussions on that. Waitress is also coming, which I'm looking forward to. But Rachel's about to embark on a whole new chapter of her life, aren't you? So you might not be seeing much theatre at all.
Well, I'll still fit it in, don't you worry. I won't be able to trek down to London every single evening anymore.
That's a shame. Saturday matinees and evenings
are
brilliant. Oh,
God, I hate doing Saturdays.
It's horrible, isn't it?
It is awful.
I think we lost the will to live one Saturday mooching around West End, didn't we?
Well, I think it might have been that week between Christmas and New Year. That was just, it was horrific.
Shutters. But Rachel, thank you very much for joining me on our road to Les Mis.
Oh, thank you.
For more information about Musical Talk, please visit our website at musicaltalk.co.uk. You can email us at feedback@musicaltalk.co.uk, listen to past episodes on iTunes and YouTube, and follow our social media channels on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I remember seeing the 25th anniversary upon which this show uses these orchestrations and will be continued to be used. Was that a sentence?
No, not even remotely.
I loved the new sound that the show has. Was so fresh, and it almost ironically felt more old-fashioned than it probably did in the 80s. And if we were to be treated with the 80s sound, it would have felt old-fashioned, because...
I have no idea how to pass that sentence.
You shall not pass.